Good day to you. My guest today is Mike Taylor, ex-BSAP, although he did his national service in the Air Force Armoured Cars. Mike, it's good to see you. Welcome on the program.
Thanks, Tony. It's a privilege for me to be here, and I really enjoyed the series, like I said earlier to you. And a big shout out to John. I actually had a couple of beers with him just before he immigrated to the Philippines, and it was good to make contact with him too. So
yes,
super.
He's in South Africa at the moment. I don't know when this will be aired, but he'll be back in the Philippines by then. But at this point in time, it's the 20th of February. Yeah, he's still in South Africa trying to get his passport. So whereabouts are you in South Africa, Mike?
I'm in a place called Magaliesig, or Magalies View. It's part of Santon Fourways area.
Ah, yes. It sounds like something's got stuck in your throat, the name of that place, but yeah.
Yeah. It's about half a K from Monte Cassino. That's quite a landmark in the north of Joburg.
Oh, flip, eh? What a name, the Battle of Monte Cassino.
Yeah, absolutely. I know a couple of guys that were there.
Well, I've just interviewed Jim Schneerberger on his first talk. His second and third talk, he was involved in that battle. And we're going to try and make it dynamic with original sounds from the battle. So it should be interesting. Tell us your story, where you were born and raised and how you ended up in the Air Force.
Yeah, my folks came to Rhodesia, or immigrated to Rhodesia in 1949 from South Africa. And I was born in Salisbury in the Lady Chancellor in 1951. And I dodged death a couple of times before I even got to school age. I was once rushed up the road by my mom upside down because I got a gobstopper in my mouth and I was choking to death. And then a couple of months later, I was in a canoe, and I think I was probably about 2 or 3 years old, and I hadn't even started swimming yet in Lake Mac. And the canoe capsized, and of course, they couldn't find me. Eventually, they got me out and resuscitated me. So before I'd even got to school age, I'd been cheating death. And I think since then, if I look back on my life, the Lord has been awesome to me. He's protected me so many times in different situations.
Amen.
I've been in some serious situations, and he's always seen me through, you know. Yeah, so basically I went to Hake Park Primary till about Standard 2. Then I went Standard 3, 4, and 5 at Amandus, which is near Concession. It's, I think, 42 k's from Salisbury on the Reta Bridge. And from there, I went to Alan Wilson. I was a boarder for the first year. And then after that, I finished my schooling at Alan Wilson. I played cricket, rugby, debating society, and the printing club, which ended up being one of my careers, or a career for me when I left school. In the debating society, I don't know if you remember a guy called Martin Locke. Yes. He was a radio DJ, and he owned Martin Locke Spin Along in Salisbury. I was in a debate with him because he was a PE, debating the authenticity of God. And I'm not sure who actually won the debate at the end of the day, but we had a good chuckle about it afterwards. Yeah. After school, my call-up papers arrived. I was called up to the Air Force, and I was intake 79, which was in the year November 72. I was the first full-time armored car course. And we basically started our basics with a lot of running and PT and that, and a bit of driving skills and mortars and stuff like that. The training was actually excellent. And the next sort of phase was going to be hard, on the square doing drill and stuff like that. And then, of course, the hurricane started, and our weekend pass, our very first one, was cancelled. And we were transferred straight away to Centinary. 2 cars went to Centinary, 2 to Wankie, and 2 to Kariba. And they said, we'll rotate the crews after a couple of weeks, and you'll each get a weekend pass. Well, 13 weeks later, the DAC arrived, and we were transferred through from Centinary to Kariba, and the Kariba guys came to Centinary.
Mike, was that the armored car with the 60 mil mortar type of weapon on it and a coaxial machine gun, was it?
Yeah, it had a Browning on a Browning 303, I think it was, or no, 7.62 Browning, and a 60 mil mortar. And we would basically did quite a lot of the training at back of New Serum there, behind Seki Reserve, or Seki Township, and then also at Nkoma Barracks. And they fired live rounds at us in the armored car just so we could hear the bang and what was it all about.
Right.
So a lot of good fun. Yeah, it was really good.
And that deployment up to now, I think that was where that farmer was killed. I forget his name. Was it De Borchgrave or
the Borchgrave, and there was another one, Kleinans. Was it Kleinans? Was also
yeah, my memory's a bit shot on
there was
that one.
two within a couple of days of each other, and we got there just after that. And Centinary was no sandbags around any buildings or anything, and we commandeered Chris. I think his name was Chris Fenton Wells. He was a tobacco farmer there. He had a hangar just around the corner from the police station. In fact, you could walk to the police station from the hangar, and that became Jock Hurricane. And so we were there. We slept in his hangar, and with all his pesticides, and we all had tight chests and stuff like that. But it was better than sleeping out in the rain. So yeah, that was. And then of course, police pioneers came out there and put up tents, and we started filling sandbags. And our basic duty was protecting the aircraft, which we did, and then guard duties at night. The SAS were there for a short while, but they just camped out in the veld sort of thing. And so we were basically helping the techs load ammo into the planes or rearming the aircraft, refueling them and pushing drums up and down the runway for them. And that was it. It was an interesting time for us. The first time I saw dead bodies coming in with half their heads off and stuff like that. And but the farmers were excellent. Unbelievable generosity and hospitality. We used to go and shower down at the Centenary Country Club at the bottom end of the runway. And, we come out the shower and there was a cold beer for you or a Coke or whatever you wanted. And one or two of the farmers' daughters took a fancy, and they would always come down to the jock and either bring a cake or something and offer to do our washing. And I do remember two of the girls. I don't know if I can mention their names.
Yeah.
Is it allowed?
Yes, go for it. Yeah.
Kathy Rickards, who I believe was married to a guy called Jimmy Swan, who was interviewed by you a while back, and Billy Besaidenote, who married a chopper pilot eventually. So us little poor in the armored cars didn't get much showing against the chopper guys,
Yeah.
But,
I will attest to the fact that having a bit of rank drew the dollies. They seem to like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
how did you protect the planes? Did you do what was done at other FAFs, where you drove along the side of planes as they were taking off, or park on the end of the runway?
We parked at the bottom of the runway. We used to do clearance patrols in the morning and in the evening up and down the runway. And then basically you could see the runway from where we were because we were right on the runway. We also did a little bit of air traffic control at some times. And in the early days, I think they were giving the north of Mozambique a good go with the Canberras and the Hunters. And the Hunters used to fly over Centenary at very low level, do a beat up and victory roll. And we listening on the radio, and they would call Salisbury Tower. Salisbury Tower will be in your location 3 minutes, and it was like about a 2-hour drive from Salisbury, and we think 3 minutes, and you could be in the bright lights, But what it was, I think it was 3 minutes was probably when they were calling in for landing instructions. It wouldn't be right into Salisbury at 3 minutes, but probably 10 or 15 minutes they would be there. It was quite interesting.
And
yeah, so,
did you do sort of patrols around farms just to reassure people, or was that out?
Yes. Yeah, we did a couple of those, and then once or twice we did protection for a farmer who had a birthday party or something, and the whole community would go there. We would drive out. We took 2 cars out there, and there was a couple of army sticks with us, and we would surround the guy's farmhouse and stuff, and position ourselves strategically on the sort of like higher ground where we could see if anything was happening, and a quick clearance patrol, and then the party would start. And then we drive back after that in the early hours of the morning.
Can you remember the numbers of terrorists that were killed in that operation? It was quite a large amount, and it was predominantly RLI, although I think some police did a good job.
RLI were the big guys there. In fact, I think I was there 3 days or 4 days after I arrived there. The first RLI guy casualty, I think he lost both his legs in a landmine at one of the farm attacks that they went to follow up. And we were going to go as to drive along the road to see if there were any mines that we could find. And luckily we didn't go that day, and they actually hit the landmine on the way out.
And how was an armored car geared up for a landmine? If you were strapped in, would you survive it, do you think?
I wouldn't like to think about that one. I'm not sure. They say that it would probably blow the wheels off, but you'd be safe. And obviously your eardrums and all that sort of would go. But
no, you were not a ferret, but an actual Panhard armored car. Is that right?
The French Panhard. It was I think it weighed 5.5 tons. It was a flat four, air cooled, and it had an hydroelectrostatic clutch. So you rev the hang out of it, you put your hand on the gear knob and pull it backwards, and it disengaged, and then you slide it down a little channel into second or third, and away you go. But it was all-wheel drive, and we used to cruise at about 80 k's an hour on the highway. And the tires would scream like hell.
Well, I'm sure you would have survived a landmine, but especially if the ground was soft. And I say that because I was in a convoy, 2 vehicles behind a ferret, which is probably, in my opinion, lighter and probably less resistant to a mine. And apart from the guy flying out the cupola like a cork, he survived. The armored car survived. They all survived.
Wow.
So, all the ferrets did. So I should think your little Panhards would have done pretty well as well.
Yeah. They were very reassuring. We were once in fact, at Kariba was quite funny. We got a message, and the RLI guys came. There were some RLI guys at the airport. I don't know what they were doing there. They heard, or we got a signal saying expect attack at 4:30. A signal came through on the telex. So we got the cars out. We made sure the fuel was out. Checked the ammo and the guns and everything. And a group of RLI guys came. I don't know if they came from the heights down to us to give us backup or what. And then the guy, I think it was Lieutenant Creel, Neil Creel. I don't know if that name rings a bell, but yeah. He was the main coordinator, and he said, "Okay, let's go and do a clearance patrol." Now, our clearance patrols was basically around the runway and along the main road near the thing, but no, he wanted to go up into the Gomos with this armored car, and so we did some really serious bunda bashing with them, and the RLI guys just loved it because they didn't have to walk; they were sitting on the mud guards of the armored car. So we did a massive clearance patrol, and we get back, and then they're offloading a Dakota with some fuel drums and stuff for the choppers. And it wasn't expect attack; it was expect a DAC. So anyway,
which is why the army invented the phonetic alphabet. Hey, Delta Alpha Kilo instead of
And but I can tell you, in that armored car in the Kariba heat in that valley, with the hatches closed, man, it was hot. I must have lost about 1 kg, and I'm a little loke anyway,
Yeah.
Quite hectic.
What did you do at night? Were you able to occasionally sit around a campfire and chew the fat a bit, or was it always on guard duty?
The Air Force at Kariba had, they had a pub there called the Air Fives. It was a little, quite a fancy little brick thing. They had a hi-fi there, and it overlooked the runway, hard standing, where the planes were stored. And we used to have a couple of beers there, but we also did guard at night there. They had 2 big gun pits with MAGs, and we would walk around to patrol the camp at night, and it was normally 2 hours at a time. And I can tell you that Kariba in winter gets really cold. We had time there where you'd have 2 blankets around you in the guard pit, and of course we also had stand twos at certain obnoxious hours where the guy would ring the bell and everybody would be into their gun pits and that. It was just the usual stuff,
I love the feeling of a military encampment at night. There was just something special about it. I think it was the camaraderie. Unless you were on really active duty, you'd get a couple of beers, and it was lovely. I just loved the atmosphere in camps.
Yeah, the national service guys, us guys in particular, I think had a good relationship with the chopper techs and the guys that were flying the Trojans, the Trogs, and the Promise. Every day we'd have fatigues from 8 till 10, filling sandbags, weeding the lawns, and cleaning up the camp and that. And then after that we'd play volleyball. And it was the national service guys against the techs, and it was good fun. I remember a couple of guys there, JB, John Britton. I know he likes a lot of your stuff and contributes. Him and Hutch, Ian Harvey, and those guys were killed in the chopper. We all were together playing volleyball at Kariba and at Centinary, and good times. but it also had to come to an end, and my national service finished, and I got called up 2 or 3 times after that. I went to Motoko on one camp, which was just off that where they didn't put in a nice tarmac runway there and some wooden, almost like Zoza huts. I don't know if you're familiar with those.
No.
It's a wooden cabin kind of thing, and 4 guys were sleeping in these. And yeah, they had a guy called Ian McIntosh. He was a coach for the Springboks at one stage. He was coaching up in Zim as well, and he was a volunteer reservist in the Air Force, and he was doing a camp at Motoko. And you'd say to him, Mac, we need you to move the truck over there, or Mac, can you please start the generator? And he'd say, man, I deserve a blimmin' medal for this, you know. Man, I deserve a blimmin' medal. Everything was, I deserve a medal. So anyway, at the end of the camp, 6 weeks, we were all getting ready to go home, and the OC called us and he said, listen, you guys, tomorrow we want you in full kit on the parade ground. We're going to do a parade. So we said, okay, cool. And oh, McIntosh, yes, why do we have to get into our kit in this for a stupid parade? I deserve a medal, man. Anyway, the next morning we were all on the hard standing, and the chopper takes off, and he comes out with his sword and everything, and he says, okay, parade, attention, and everybody, and he says, and he calls forward McIntosh, Ian McIntosh, and he says, Mac, come forward. And he present arms and everything, and all the drill, and the chopper comes flying over at low level and drops a whole big bag of bog rolls out the chopper onto McIntosh's head. And he says, this is for all the BS that you've been talking. And he says, now here's your medal. And what they did, they cut a box of medicine cigarettes, the lid, they cut it out in the shape of 4 medals, covered with tin foil from the kitchen, and they presented him with his medals for the camp.
Oh, brilliant. That's a lovely sense of humor.
Yeah, yeah. So that was good fun for us. And McIntosh was a good guy. I mean, he partied every night and really a good motivator. And I understand why the Springboks were so successful with him as a coach. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so after Motoko was my last camp. And then the next call up, we got continuous service started. So continuous meant that it was 6 weeks in, 10 days home, 6 weeks in, 10 days home. And my first camp was to a place called Enkeldoorn, just south of Salisbury. And that was the police camp where we were. I was saying I got transferred from the Air Force to the BSAP PATU. And we had our initial training at Mazoe and at Goromonzi, very intense. It was camouflage, concealment, compass reading, first aid, terrorist weapons, tracking, anti-tracking. It was really and it was done by a guy called Reg Seeking, who was ex-SAS.
And can I interject there?
Yeah.
When I left the army, I actually joined PATU as an instructor, and we used to go out to Mazoe. And Reg Seekings was there. He was more than just SAS. He was the founding member of the Long Range Desert Patrol. I think that morphed into the SAS. He was a very interesting character. He was one of those guys that used to go into German airfields and shoot them up from jeeps. And if we ever got bored listening or doing a bit of training, we'd ask him to tell us a story, and that would be us for the day. We wouldn't have to do anything because he'd just talk. But he was a lovely guy and very, very knowledgeable, of course. So you had a good instructor. So
we might have even crossed, I don't know what year that was, I think 74.
No, mine was much later, 79, 80.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. But and that was good. We really enjoyed that. And then first deployment was to Enkeldoorn. And that from there, that was the police camp. But their jurisdiction went all the way to a place called Sadza. It's a base. It was an internal affairs base, exactly 100 k's. Excuse me, 100 k's east of Enkeldoorn, and directly south of Marondera, as they call it now. And it was a no-go area for a long time, where the scouts were operating there. And the idea was they wanted the police to just go in and see what the reaction would be to the Rhodesian forces coming back into that area. And it was quite a thing for me, because all the buildings were painted with ZANU and Chimurengas, Gonna Win, and all this kind of stuff on all the buildings. And anyway, so I was there just to see what was actually going on with the locals. And the one day we set up an ambush just on the border of the European farming area and the TTL. And it was starting to get dark, but it wasn't quite dark. And along comes a couple of guys, and they'd obviously had too much to drink. And they were staggering along the road, and we said, okay, he has some curfew breakers. Let's give them a shot, And the next thing, the one fell over, and we thought, okay, these guys are not, it's pointless shooting them, So let's go and arrest them. So we arrested them, and we radioed into Enkleton and said, listen, we've got 5 curfew breakers. So the guy said, okay, see you in the morning. Just send us a lockstat where you are, and we'll come and fetch you. So what happens? 2 Land Rovers with 5 body boxes strapped onto the roof of the Land Rover come out there and said, where are the guys? So we said, no, they're here. And they said, but they're still alive. Shoot them and put them in the box. So anyway, they got arrested. But looking back, they might have been a gang at that stage, exfiltrating or infiltrating back into the TTL. Could have been anything, but at that stage, we didn't even think about that. So that was Motoko. Not Motoko, Suds Base. And then after that, I did a couple of call-ups at Rutenga, where we were guarding the railway line. And that meant getting up at 4 in the morning and getting ready. And so first light, as soon as that sun started to touch the horizon, they would drop us off in sticks. 2 sticks per Land Rover, and they would drive 10 Ks, drop off the first 4 guys, drive another 10 Ks, drop off 4 guys, and they would just leapfrog in all the way from Rutenga to Bite Bridge. And then we would walk in because the road ran parallel to the railway tracks between Rutenga and Bite Bridge. And so you walk in 2 Ks maximum, and you're at the railway line. Then you walk 2.5 Ks south or north, and you'd meet the other 2 guys from the other stick, and then walk back out to the road. So within half an hour, the railway line between Bite Bridge and Rutenga was cleared of landmines. We checked the railway line for landmines and any disturbance on the tracks. So that was just basically ensuring that the lifeline of Rhodesia import and export was held open. And then,
I think for our foreign viewers who don't know the significance of that Rutenga Bite Bridge railway line, it was the main lifeblood source of our whole country, where fuel came in, exports went out, arms and ammunition came in. It was a vital line that had to be protected. Was there a link of protection from Rutenga up to Gwillow?
I have no idea.
I don't know where it went from there. I'm not very familiar with it. But that's quite incredible to do that length of railway line in, like you say, a few hours.
Yeah. The railways use diesel locomotives, and they used to start those locos at 3 o'clock in the morning and run them for 20 minutes and then switch them off again. And I said to the guy, why do you do that? He said, no, because the condensation in the turbines or something causes them to rust or whatever. So they just keep them running like that all the time. And so basically the patrol was done by sort of before breakfast. The lines were cleared and the first lot of trains would run. And on those trains would be a stick of guys, 2 guys in the locomotive and 2 guys in the guardsway at the back, just as backup for the guys in the loco. But again, that was something interesting. We on one occasion, I was in the locomotive with a guy called Kevin Sheehan, who's recently passed away, and we just chatting to the driver, and he says with his binoculars looking down the track, and we thought, well, it's pretty clear, the tracks are fine, but he's watching the tracks with the dynos, and the next thing he just hits full brakes on this loco, but nothing happens. It just slows down because, I mean, you got so many millions of tons on the back of that thing, and the loco weighs 20-30 tons, and we were doing about 30 Ks, and I couldn't see anything, and the next thing we could see some cattle on the track, but far away. Anyway, he blows the horn and keep bop, 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 nothing happening. The cattle just sit there and watch the train coming, and we see the cattle coming closer. Eventually, I grabbed the front, the bulkhead on the locomotive, expecting to have a sudden impact of hitting all these cattle. Never felt a thing. You just see cattle flying into the air. And we eventually stopped. I think probably a K or more passed. So it took us 3 Ks or 4 Ks to stop after we'd seen these guys, these cattle. And all it was just carcass and skin stuck underneath all the wagons. Oh. Just nothing you could do. Just start up and go again. And
a little anecdote there. I know some viewers get sick of my anecdotes, but I'll tell it anyway. I worked in Australia on the railway lines before I went to my national service. And we used to have to clean the engines at the end of our shift. And one of the things we had to do is go under the the engines sort of underground with steam hoses and spray off all the flesh and brains and stuff from under there.
Yeah.
And on a couple of occasions, it was the odd human that had jumped under.
Wow.
They were all wound up there. So I can empathize with doing that, seeing that rather.
Yeah, the smell was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and also with the protection of the rail link, there was also, we dropped off sticks that the Booby River, and there was another river guarding the railway bridge and the road bridge there. And they would spend a week there. And again, talking about rat packs, we used to throw all the curried eggs at the locomotives as they went past. But we had a big steel drum there that they used to drop off water for us. The train would sometimes stop and refill our water supplies. And the guy said to us, if you want water next time, just don't throw eggs at our locos. But so we had a good, so that was basically the protection of the rail link. And then I went to Bight Bridge for a couple of camps. And based in Bight Bridge, we were allowed to go across the border if we had a passport and some foreign exchange currency, or 20 rand, $20 you could take out the country on a daily basis. So we took our $20, and some guys had brought rands with them. So we hiked across the bridge, and the cars, we were actually just walking across the bridge, and the woman stopped and said, would you guys like a lift? So we said, sure, baby, we were on our way. So we went to Messina. We walked around the town. It took us 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. And we said, okay, let's hit the pub. So we had to wait for them to open. And eventually, sorry, we also mentioned to the lady we need a lift home. So she said, yeah, sure, she works in Messina and she'll give us a lift home. So by the time we got collected at 4:30 or 4 o'clock, we'd had quite a few beers. And naturally, we let her know, we didn't know who she was, but we let her know what we thought of our officer commanding. And anyway, the next morning we get called in to a parade, get in full kit. We've had a sighting of tours, and we want you guys to go and investigate. You're going to do a 5-day OP in the Gongwe Mountains, which is about 40 k's north of Bight Bridge. So full kit, boiling hot. I mean, 44 degrees was nothing there. And so they dropped us off on the edge of the European farming area, and they said, okay, off you go. So we climbed the back of the mountain so that we wouldn't be seen. And but it took us the whole afternoon to get up there, and we basically ran out of water. It was so hot. And we dug it in the ground there looking for water, because somebody had marked on the map, dig here for water and you'll get it. Anyway, we didn't find it. We just got bat leaves and bat wings, should I say, in the water. And so we filtered it through our shirts and managed to get some water in our bodies, but we were finished. So we thought we'd radio for help and say, listen, we can't carry on, we need water. And so we had a TR-48, not the AR-63 with us, a big job. And threw the Sputnik up into the trees, and we could hear the Portuguese fishing fleet off the coast of Mozambique. We could hear SAA planes taking off. We could hear everybody excepting Jock at Bight Bridge. And eventually we moved the radio, we moved the aerial, and eventually we got comms, and they said, okay, walk down and we'll pick you up. And it took us over 4 hours to get down and back to the road to where we were going to pick up. And needless to say, it was a waste of time and a big joke. But, very unprofessional of us to run out of water. But at the debrief the next morning, the member in charge, I won't mention his name, he says to us, you guys, I just want to tell you that the woman that you told was your story about the member in charge was my wife. So he says, that patrol wasn't actually a sighting or anything to do with the Gooks. It was just my revenge on you guys. So, yeah.
So, Tommy, when you went over the border, were you in uniform?
No, civvies.
Okay, yeah.
Civvies. We had to have a passport and some currency to get across. But it was.
Did you ever meet Mimi, who became Mimi Shaw, call sign 303 or something at Bight Bridge? She became quite well known in that area, and actually
there was a Kaywood family. Sorry, the Kaywood family. We went to a Kaywood ranch once. The guy's name was Benji Kaywood. I don't know if that's her dad or cousin, uncle, or whatever, but Benji Kaywood was unbelievable. We were standing around getting ready to go. We had tea or something there, And he said, "Oh, you guys want a guinea fowl for supper?" So we said, "Yeah, that'll be great." So he pulled out a 9mm, and the guinea fowl took off. And he just, from the hip, just shot, and boom, headshot. This guinea fowl was gone.
Wow.
Unbelievable shot. I've never seen anything like it. And so we had guinea fowl that night, courtesy of Benji Kaywood. I don't know if it's any relation.
I'm not sure, possibly. Now, Mimi married Beaver Shaw,
Yes.
we've interviewed, and I've been trying like crazy to get Mimi on board, but I don't know, she's not answering my WhatsApp messages, so I've more or less given up. But I'd like to interview her because I believe she was very well known there in Bite Bridge, and yeah, Kaywood was her maiden surname. That's right.
Yeah.
So what type of equipment did you have in PATU in terms of comms? Was that, you mentioned the A76?
A63. Was it A63?
The big box one or the nice streamlined one?
It was almost like a supersonic radio.
Yeah.
That's the size, yeah. That size. But the TR-48 was a massive thing. It was like, you needed Bergen to carry it almost.
Yeah.
And we used that once on that call up to there, but most of the time it was A63.
And who did you report back to? The BSAP in Bite Bridge?
Yeah, BSAP safety, BSAP member in charge, Bite Bridge. And we were also involved with ground coverage. There was a guy called Dave Ward, PO Dave Ward. He's living in Canada now. He was wounded at Chituripatsi. There's an internal affairs camp at Chituripatsi, and our first trip out to Chituripatsi was to take him back there. The tours had said that they'd killed him. They actually killed his dog in the ambush. The dog was killed, but he got a graze on the side of his kidney, just a flesh wound. Nothing very close, but nothing serious. And he was off, I think, 3 weeks out of hospital, and then we took him back. And they said, "Look, the guys know we're coming." So every 2 weeks was a police changeover. So we knew we were going to get stomped along the way somewhere. And so we said, "Well, let's go in at night." So we went partly through the European farming area. I don't know if it was near the Tuli block or one of those areas, and then through back into the TTL to the Native Affairs camp. The next morning, there's a little note there on the guardhouse. The Madibas came and left a little note saying, "We saw you coming back last night. Welcome, but we let you have the night off, but we're going to review." And then every day they would send a little note saying, "We're going to burn the grader, or we're going to hit the dips or something," and the farming dips and that. But we responded a few times, always a lemon. And then the ones they said they were going to hit the bottle store, and we thought, no, we'll respond to that. So we notified Bite Bridge and said, "Look, we've had int that they're going to hit the store." And so we got a message back saying, "Okay, go to the store, buy a couple of beers, and go back to camp, and even give the prisoners a beer each so they make a lot of noise, and make as much noise as you can, pretend you're having a party." So we went and did that. And that night, RLI parachuted in. And the next morning, there was a whole lot of bodies lying around the store. And so there was apparently some that got away. We chased them, hedge hopping with the choppers to the Portuguese border, which is not far, probably I think 15 or 20 k's from the border. And but we didn't get them. And that was that camp. We also had one other incident I'll mention, and I'm almost done with you, Tony, is that we got a call from a chief. I don't know, it came through our command center that there'd been a murder. And they said we must go and investigate and make an arrest. So we went again before first light. We were up and we walked into the kraal area. And we sat there for about half an hour watching to see if there was any activity that looked suspicious to us. Nothing. So we thought, okay, well, let's advance. And we went into the camp, into the kraal, greeted the chief and said, "Look, we've heard the bad news about the murder." And he said, "Yeah, here's the guy here." And the guy was sitting next to the chief, and there was the body lying there. His tongue was all swollen out of his head, sort of thing, full of flies, and what a terrible sight. And we said to him, "Listen now, what happened here?" So he said, "No, I killed my brother." So we said, "Is it your blood brother? Is it your brother?" He says, "Yeah, my brother." He says, "We were having a few beers, and one other man of the village said that I was sleeping with my brother's wife, and my brother confronted me, so we started fighting. And I kicked him in the head." And I said, "And where's the boots that you kicked him with?" And he said, with my bare feet. He kicked his brother in the head with bare foot and kicked him and killed him. So we put the body in the tin box and loaded him in the back and took him to Canoe Bridge, arrested him for murder. Yeah, so interesting times.
So that raises the question, did your job in PATU overlap with ordinary uniformed policemen? Because that sounds to me like a uniformed policeman's job.
Well, the uniformed policeman there was a constable, Porfa, and a patrol officer, Dave, what's his name again? Dave Ward. And but they were in civvies with a police cap and a camo jacket on, kind of thing. So the police presence was actually the police cap and the BSAP shoulder tabs on his jacket. And yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah.
No, carry on.
Just another story I remember was we were at Canoe Bridge, and one of the guys, I won't mention his name because he's joined Scouts shortly after that, and he's still in a sensitive area kind of thing. He developed a boil under his ear, and so we radioed, because we were right 45 minutes flying time from Canoe Bridge, and they said, just go to Madiba across the river, the SAP, and get assistance there. So we radioed these guys and said, look, we want to come across the Limpopo, we need medical assistance. So the guy says, yeah, sure. So we said, look, just notify your guys that are on guard that we're coming. We don't want to get shot. So the guy said, okay, give us half an hour. And they said, okay, you could come across now. So we walk out and we say, we're coming. And they said, we can't see you. So we said, okay. We held up a big white map. We said, we can't see you. So we were right up into the water now to our sort of ankles. And we said, we're here in the water. We can't see you. So we said, are we in the right place? And eventually they said, okay, now we see you. I mean, that's how close we were to them when they couldn't see us. And,
as I mentioned in a recent interview, our camouflage was absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
I did share this before, but I watched the patroller guys walking down the Zambezi Valley. They were in shorts, and the tops were obviously full-length shirts and combat jackets, and it looked as if it was just legs walking.
Yeah.
Because the top half was so beautifully camouflaged.
Yeah.
It was quite odd to see, actually.
Correct. And so we get across the border there now into this camp. Now, us as national servicemen, we just had a little black shoulder, almost like felt, epaulet on us to show that we were National Service Party. And all these guys were saluting us, and we were just normal troopies kind of thing, you know. They all, come here, come here, come here. And they were off to the officers' mess. We sat in the officers' mess and had Cokes and cream sodas, and they wanted our rat packs. So we quite happily exchanged rat packs, because theirs had Cokes and all kinds of goodies in it, you know. So we scored big time that day. He had the boil lance, and we crossed back across the border at the same time. Good
Lord. I don't know if you know, and I only know this from interviews with South African guys that I've done, that Madiba was built specifically for a battalion of parabats to go into southeast Rhodesia. There were 3, I think it was Alpha Bravo or X-Ray, something Zulu companies that went in from Madiba. So that runway and everything was built specifically for that.
Yeah, I remember hearing about those guys going in there.
Mm-hmm. For those viewers that have not seen it, it's right near the beginning of the series where the South African parabats were interviewed. Really fascinating interviews.
Yeah.
Very aggressive men and well respected. And they did an honourable thing for our country.
Yeah. Just as a sidebar, nothing to do with me personally, but a friend of mine, I'm a keen biker, and I've had motorbike since 1969. And I just last year sold my bike. So I've been 50 more years riding my motorbikes. And I've toured all over South Africa and all the rallies in Rhodesia and the rallies in South Africa. And on in 1970, I think it was 71, I was going up to Nyanga on a bike, and just outside the Park Lane there on Jameson Avenue, there was a guy standing on the side of the road with a map on his motorbike. So I made a U-turn, and I said, where are you going? So he says, no, he's going to the rally in Nyanga. So I said, well, look, it's getting dark. Come and doss at my house, and you can have supper, and we'll go together tomorrow, because I'm also going. So he hummed and hard. He doesn't know me, and how am I going to, can he trust me? And I said, look, use it, don't use it. Come if you want to. So I said, come. So eventually he came. And so we had supper at my place, and we rode out to Nyanga. and he had a little tent, a little 2-man tent, which I paid $5 for. I bought the tent from him, and he said, keep the money here. You can have the tent, but you keep the $5, and when the next time I come, you give me the $5 for my trip. And eventually I opened a bank account in South Africa with money that I went on holiday with, and I'd banked some of it there with him, all on trust. And all these years we've been friends. And I said to him, what do you do? So he said, no, he's in the post office. So I said, okay. And he seemed to be in the post office. So, but it turns out that he was a colonel in the Secret Service, the Bureau of State Security. And when the Nixon talks were on, he was facilitating all the communications between South Africa and the United States. And then the one day he phoned me and he said, Mike, can I come and spend the night at your place? I said, sure, I'll organize some Kariba bream and we'll have a braai. And so we had a braai at my place. And he says, can you get me into the police armory? So I said, yeah, sure. I know a couple of the guys there and I had my police ID. So we drive in, he had her on Cherubaki. And he says, okay, drive around the back with this thing. We parked the thing. We went around to the front and we sat there with, I think he was Chief Inspector Hollingsworth. He was head of the BSAP armory. And 10 minutes later, the guy says, okay, it's ready. So we go out. But this one Cherubaki was now down to its axle, almost dragging the backside on the ground. 100 AK-47s and 4 periscopes, microscopes for ballistic testing. The South Africans, when they left all their equipment there, and he came back in to fetch it as a civvy. And so we just parked it out in the backyard of my house in the open. And he left the next morning. I said to him, what happens at the border? So he says, well, if it's on the Rhodesian side and they question me inside, I'll just twist the guy's neck off. And he says, if it's outside, I'll shoot him. So he said, okay. And he said, if they hear the shooting from the South African side, the boom will be open by the time I get to the gate. So they were expecting it.
Jeez.
But he was 4th Dan or 5th Dan black belt. And he only told me that in later years. But yeah.
So when you met him at the armory, did you know what he was going to do? Or
no. He just said to me, do you know Uncle Holly? Uncle Holly was his name. So I said, I know him. I know of him. I don't have any direct dealings, but because I used to be in the police printers, which I joined at the end of in 78. I was based at police headquarters, so I had dealings with most of the big guys there, because we printed force orders every week, and all the traffic books, the murder dockets, all that kind of stuff was printed through us at police printers. And so I basically drove in there. I knew who it was and everything. So, but I didn't know anything about that op until it actually happened. He'd actually done quite a lot of preparation. He had a spare battery in the thing with long enough cables to wire it from the other side of the cab. Blankets behind the back seat to stop any rounds coming through the back. The doors also had blankets stuffed in them, and a spare coil. Quite a lot of interesting stuff in the bucky.
Jeez.
Yeah.
And did you ever get deployed by helicopter in your time in PATU?
Yeah. At Chituri Patsi, we went out a few times in the chopper. Straight away from the beginning at New Ceremony at the National Service. We used to do clearance patrols of the airbase, sometimes by air and sometimes by armored car. So I flew quite a bit in the Alouette there. And then at Kariba, we did quite a lot, and quite a lot of fixed wing. The pilots would take off and he'd say, okay, hold the stick here and keep the compass on bearing. And he would open the paperback and he'd fly. And then he'd look at his watch and he'd say, okay, turn. And we turn. And all he was doing was relaying the Zambezi military radio signals through to Kariba or wherever. So we would just relay station in the sky, basically. And we do that sometimes for the whole day and sometimes just the morning. And then at nighttime, we'd also fly. We'd take off at like 9 o'clock at night and fly down the Zambezi Valley. Beautiful to watch that river, like a silver thing, mirror ribbon going down the valley. Looking for fires on our side and their side to see where, and we'd mark it on the map. Okay, we saw fires here. And then they would deploy sticks to investigate if there was any transit. So that was quite a bit of flying. And then at Chituri Patsi, we did quite a bit there, flying there. In fact, Constable in Porfu actually just about pulled my trouser legs off with them. He was so petrified. I was sitting next to the pilot because I was a stick leader. And then he was sitting on the window next to me, and this thing and he just turned the chopper like this to go left, sorry. And the next thing, this guy grabbed my leg. I thought he was going to pull it off because he thought he was going to fall out.
And did you ever fly low over the water? I think that's very impressive. The guy interviewed recently, I forget who it was. He said the pilots were so flipping good that this one guy put his front wheel into the water and let it skim along like a wheelbarrow.
Oh, wow.
It sounds like a tall story, but I've actually heard it with my own ears. So did you have any sort of daylight experiences going over the lake in a chopper?
No, not in a chopper, fixed wing. We went over off out of Kariba and then straight over the top of the wall and down the river. That was quite impressive. But two of the guys in the plane parked Persians as we went over the wall, and he put it into a dive and then he hit the bumps with the air with it so hot down the below. And two of the guys were putting their caps into their mouths and filling them up. And
after the war, I did a canoe expedition from there to the bridge down that river. It was absolutely beautiful.
Wow.
But crooks and hippo, they used to charge us. It was frightening then. But so that brought that was your national service, wasn't it?
National service, and then the continuous. So 6 weeks in, 10 days at work, 6 weeks in, 10 days at work. And I did that from 74 till 78. Good. And then in 78, I was offered a position at headquarters, police headquarters. So I joined full time. I signed a 3-year contract, and I started at the police printers. And automatically, because of my year at Technicon and stuff like that, I got rank of 3 bars, which is a section officer. And at the end of the 3 years, you're supposed to write inspector. But of course, with Mugabe, I was in the ZRP for 10 days. Automatically transferred from BSAP to ZRP, 10 days, and then I was finished. 19th or 20th, no, April, May. In May, I was finished in the police.
And during your continuous call-up, were you married or still single?
Yeah, I was married.
How did it affect you, Mark?
Basically, I dated this girl whose father was a major in the signals for 4 years. We were married for 14 months, and she worked for a tourism company, and she went up to Nyanga and met a guy that was protecting the hotel there, one of the soldiers from, I think he was from Gwela. And anyway, I was also planning to go to the States. So I actually went to the States and got myself a residence permit and a work permit organized. And I came back, and she said to me, I went to work the one day, the bedroom cupboard keys were missing. So I thought, well, that's strange. Anyway, I locked the cupboard because I had a revolver in the cupboard. I locked the whole bedroom. And then at 10 o'clock, I got a phone call saying, why did you lock the bedroom? So I said, well, it's got sensitive material in there and weapons and stuff. So I locked it. So I said, why? What's wrong? So she said, no, I'm at home. So I said, what are you doing there? She said, I've come to fetch my stuff. So I said, okay, I'm coming. So I said to her, listen, what's going on? So she said, no, she just doesn't want to go to America. So I said, well, we don't go. We just go to South Africa or Australia, wherever you want to go. So she said, no, I want to stay here. So I said, well, we'll stay here. And so she said, but I need my space. So I said, oh, there's another guy involved. So she said, no, I just need my space. So I said, look, choose right now. You either go or you stay. And she said, I'm going. So I said, cheers. And that was it. 14 months after dating for 4 years, 14 months later, she was gone. And then that's what brought me to the Lord. I knew her cousin or her cousin's wife, and they had also got divorced. And my current wife's brother was shot 3 days after Mugabe came into power in Sonoya area. He was a Lance inspector in support unit, and she was overseas at the time. Anyway, she came back and we got together. And so when we wanted to get married, nobody wanted to know us excepting this Baptist minister. And he said, look, come for counseling and I'll marry you. So we went for counseling, and I said, this guy's a fruitcake. I'm not going back for counseling. But anyway, we went back the next week, and he said, look, come to a couple of services after I've married you. And so I said, I'll commit to that. But eventually I got offered a job in Joburg. So I moved to Joburg, But I said, look, I made a commitment that I would go to 3 services. And we went to a church service, and there was also an extradition lay preacher. And the lights just suddenly came on, and I accepted the Lord as my savior, and it changed my whole life. I was one of the first of 20 visas allocated to Zimbabwe for America. I was a P6 preference because of a skill or of trade that was in short supply, and I was straight into America. And so I went to Las Vegas, and I started running there. I did the 10K Olympic qualifier in the Los Angeles 1984 games. And yeah, that was the start of my running, and I still run today. I ran the Valentine's night race the other night, a 10K in just on an hour. So I'm quite happy with my performance for 74. Yeah, so that's me, Tony. My story.
I think the only running I do is if the fridge door's about to fall open and let something drop on the floor.
Yeah.
I'm what you call a superior diamond couch potato. But no, there are a few questions I'd like to ask you, which wasn't fully answered. How did you find the mental stress of continuous call-up? Because a lot of other guys I've interviewed found that 6 weeks out and 10 days back at home, it just played with your head, it played with relationships. Did you find that, or were you not so stressed by it?
I've always been an outdoor kind of guy. So for me, call-ups was a camp. And, sleeping out in the bush in the sleeping bag was my element. So that kind of stuff didn't worry me. I was only married later on in the years. So basically, I was young and free and carefree, and I didn't really worry too much about it. Yeah, I don't have any, well, I don't think I've got any PTSD or whatever they call it. No anger in me at all. I forgave my ex-wife for what she did. Can't hold any grudges in life, and so all good from my side. I don't think there was anything like it. The only thing that's affected me is my hearing. Because when you sit in that armored car and that mortar goes off, it's right by your ear.
Yeah.
And so you got your headset on for the radio, listening to commands, but it just goes straight through those into your ear because you're sitting below the gun, right below, or the mortar tube. And yeah, so that was quite a bit. And then obviously the day-to-day shooting in the bush also affected my hearing quite a bit. And motorbikes. I mean, I used to do drag racing. I was the Rhodesian drag champion in 1971 and 72 at Marlborough Racetrack. So yeah, so the noise of motorbikes, guns, and of course the discos at the Cock Door and all those places,
yeah,
all had taking effect now.
So what year did you become a Christian? Was that
1984? No, 84, I think.
There was a huge absorption into the kingdom in the 80s. I got nobbled by the Lord on the 31st of May 1981 at 8 o'clock in the evening. I remember it. And it was a wonderful experience because I'd been carrying around a lot of sort of guilt and frustration and anger. And I found that as soon as I was forgiven, that changed the whole concept of what was bugging me. Because, when you've killed somebody or you've whatever, that sort of anger and disgust for yourself that you might develop later becomes a very powerful thing in your mind.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be free of it. And it was wonderful, man. Wonderful experience.
Yeah.
And then my wife divorced me, just like you. So
yeah,
we've got a similar pathway there.
Yeah. I'm coming up for 44 or 45 years this year. April, 45 years, I think. Yeah, so no regrets on that side. No, I'm still friends with the family on her side, but not with her personally. And I'm in contact with the brothers. There's no hard feelings at all. And in fact, you interviewed Frank Guthrie recently.
Yeah.
From RLI, one commander.
Oh, yes.
He's a cousin of theirs.
Right.
Yeah.
Before we close, tell us about the printing job that you did for the police. That was as a regular section officer, which I think, would you agree that would be the equivalent rank of a sergeant in the army?
I'm not sure. I thought it was more like it's the highest non-commissioned rank.
Yeah.
So yeah, probably
a sergeant major or colour
sergeant.
Something like that. Yeah. Just for our foreign viewers. you did an apprentice, and then what type of things did you see and do as a printer at PGHQ?
Quite a lot different to what was done in Civvy Street. In Civvy Street, we did magazine work, color brochures. When I worked in Vegas, I worked for a company called Haynes and Thomas, and they used to print magazines for all the casinos and stuff like that. And also, I worked for a company called Jim Fast Gaming, which printed all the gambling tickets for the horse racing and stuff like that. But that was just like a sausage machine. You just put that machine on and run it for 8 hours solid. I used to work from 2 in the afternoon till 10 at night, and then go for breakfast, and we'll go for a couple of drinks and whatever. And yeah, so that was in my BC days. But,
and what made you come back to Africa from living in Las Vegas? I don't think I would have done that.
My commitment to my wife.
Oh.
She had 2 miscarriages while we were there.
Mm.
And she said to me, listen, I'm very depressed, and I know it's your dream to live here, and I want to go back. I miss my folks, I miss my friends. I've got no real support base here. So I said, look, I stood before God and said, my marriage vows were for better or worse, and whatever it is for you want to go, we go.
Mm.
So I booked the tickets, and we came back to South Africa. And I came back in June or July 84, and just after the Olympics, and moved to Vereniging, and I was offered a job with a company, and they were doing so well that they bought me a brand new 3 Series BMW out the box, and gave me an allowance for entertainment, which included making sure that customers got entertained and that sort of stuff. And we're living high, and then they got caught for fraud at Sasol, backhanding the buyers and whatever. So I thought that's my gap. So I opened a business, a lighting company. And shortly after that, I opened an electronics company as well. So I had a lighting company and an electronics company. And it was all going well until the BEE started in the early 90s. And so I just made a commitment there. I'm not prepared to give my company away to anybody. I'll just shut it down. So
for our foreign viewers, BEE in South Africa is Black Economic Empowerment, isn't it?
Yeah, broad-based Black empowerment.
And basically, if you have more than 50 staff, you've got to have a Black director.
I'm not sure that the actual things, but you've got to have a 50% or 50 or 51% Black ownership or 50% Black ownership. And you've got to be registered to do that. And a lot of guys just put a Black person or a colored person in on the paperwork and, and carried on business like that. But for me, ethically, it wasn't the way I do business. So I just said, I'm not prepared to do that. And so I shut it down. And it was a tough decision because I lived in a double garage for 4 years with a leaking roof. But in that, I put my kids through university and college without a loan. And again, the Lord's hand was on me. His word says, never have I seen the righteous forsaken or their children begging bread. Mm-hmm. And they're very successful people today, holding down high-powered jobs.
Yeah,
so,
amen. Yeah, I had a fairly similar thing when I came to England. I lived in a garden shed. Had no toilets, no heating. I used to pee on the tree so much outdoors it actually died in the end.
Yeah.
What a fascinating talk. Now, before we close, you wanted to give a testimony to a couple of guys.
Yeah, well, the 3 guys, basically, 2 guys, now that mentioning 3, my brother-in-law, Billy Gloss, who was a Lance Inspector in Support Unit, he was shot 3 times in the back at Sonoya after independence. It was actually one of these, what do you call those, camps where everybody had to go into.
Assembly point.
Protect the village. Assembly point.
Assembly points, yeah. Sure.
Yeah, he was shot at an assembly point after independence, so it was just pointless.
Mm.
And then, of course, the 2 mates from school, Dougie Bates and Brian Edwards, who were close friends of mine at school. And I just wanted to honor them for what they did for Rhodesia, because they gave their lives for Rhodesia.
Mm.
And they can't speak for themselves now. So I just wanted to honor them and say to their families, my condolences. Thanks, Tony.
It's one of the sort of phrases I'm using now in my appeal to people to come forward and talk, is that a lot of our mates can't talk for themselves.
Correct.
I lost 5 guys, and they can't talk for themselves, and if that's the sole reason you come forward and talk on their behalf, it's a worthy thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know that, and I think there's also a lot of the one guy that I was with. I'm still friends with all the guys that were in my stick from 72. Not 72, from 74. We're all still in contact, and we have a chat, a group chat on WhatsApp. But one of them was actually at Monte Cassino for the Zulu Scouts. He was also involved in a raid into Botswana. And I was speaking to him the other day, and he says he knows Paul Kagame because he was involved with moving some equipment or something out of Rwanda recently. And so we're all friends, but he would never come on here and say what he's been doing. But I mean, he was frontline Zulu Scouts. And but I'm not going to mention names or anything. But yeah, he's here in South Africa, and he's doing very well for himself. Mugabe took his farm in 2000. He used to farm in the Marandela area. Yeah. So yeah, that's
it seems with these African leaders, they just can't improve. It's just destruction and theft, no matter which way you look.
I don't know if you guys have heard in the UK, and this is over the last couple of days, that the military was out in force in Harare again in their armored vehicles. Did you see that?
I have heard vaguely of it. I'm not familiar with it. Yeah.
Okay, good. Because I was at service on Sunday morning. I spoke to one of the guys that's living here, and he said to me that there's a guy called Geza is the main driving force behind this coup or attempted coup. And he says he was a CIO operator under Mananagwa, and Chiwenga, who's the 2IC there, and this Geza are doing something to oust Mananagwa, but how far it'll get or how far it won't get, who knows. But he's apparently been hiding in KG6 barracks, and the guys in the barracks, they won't give him up. So there's obviously a 50-50 or 40-60 split of the opinion there that Mananagwa must go. So we'll see.
He certainly needs to, I think, but is this guy just going to be another snake? We don't know.
Yeah. Well, like I said to my wife, it's just moving the deck chairs on the Titanic.
It's very sad. But I think on that note, we will end this chat to you.
Thank you, Tony.
It's been a very interesting talk. I've really enjoyed it. And thank you for coming to do it. And I'd like to encourage other guys to do the same.
Yeah. The big thing is, for days after you'd asked me, I thought, you know what, I really don't need to speak because I really don't have anything to offer. But I think each guy, no matter what he did, whether it was internal affairs, a cook in the kitchens, they all played a part in the total war effort. And
yes.
without the cook, you didn't have food. Without the nurse, you didn't get better.
Yeah.
Without the pilot, you didn't get to where you wanted to go. So every person in the military, whatever rank, position, should come on here. I want to encourage them because apart from seeing your mates on YouTube, it's an opportunity to place your part in history on YouTube.
Yes, definitely. It's also an opportunity for me as a believer to do a little bit of witnessing, which is nice.
Yeah.
And I think several people have now said to me that this channel is becoming the sort of semi-official depository of our history. And I never really thought of that until these three guys said it. And so I realized that when one day John and I are going to croak, and what's going to happen to all these videos. So John has agreed that I approach the Imperial War Museum and to become official lasting custodians of these videos.
Yeah.
And I've just been a bit slack in doing that, but that's what I plan to do.
Sure. Oh, great. Excellent. Good luck with that one. I hope it works out for the good of everybody.
Yeah, thank you. And
all the work is not in vain.
We'll end it there, and thanks very much, Mike.
Thanks,
I enjoyed this talk, and I know everyone else will too.
I hope it fills your time and it gives somebody some content to look at and enjoy. And God bless everybody from Rhodesia. I appreciate it.
Part of the tapestry. Thanks, Mike. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Tony. All the best.